Hello my crochet friends, this is Sarah from Ned and Mimi, and in this tutorial we are going to make this gorgeous Tunisian crochet infinity scarf. Now if you are brand new to Tunisian crochet, you might like to check out my video on Tunisian crochet basics, but if you already have one or two Tunisian projects under your belt, then you can dive right into this scarf project. So for this scarf you will need about 450 yards of fingering weight yarn and a 5.5mm or letter I Tunisian crochet hook. For my scarf I used Capretta Superwash fingering from WeCrochet, and this is a gorgeous blend of superwash merino wool and some cashmere in there as well. And while you can make this scarf just by following along with the video, I do also recommend that you grab the free crochet pattern that accompanies this tutorial, and you can find that on my website nedandmimi.com, and it is linked below. So for this tutorial, I am not actually going to make the entire scarf. Instead, I am going to crochet a small swatch to show you how to work the stitch pattern for this project. And to make it easier to see my stitches, I am not going to use a fingering weight yarn. I'm actually going to use some worsted weight acrylic yarn and a 7mm hook for my swatch. So without further ado, let's get started. So for this pattern, we will begin with a slip knot as always, and then we need to chain any even number. So I am going to chain 12. So there is my starting chain. Now I'm just going to flip it over and find my back bumps here, and that's where I'm going to work into for my foundation row. So I'll skip the first chain from the hook, then I'll insert my hook under the back bump of the second chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, insert my hook under the back bump of the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then I'll just continue that all the way along the chain. Okay, so now I have 12 loops on my hook, which is the same number of chains that I worked at the beginning. So now I'm just going to work the return pass. So I will chain one like so, and then I'll work off the loops one at a time by yarning over, pulling through two loops, yarn over, pull through the next two, and so on all the way back to the start of the row. Okay, so that is my foundation row worked. And remember, no matter what stitch pattern you're working in Tunisian crochet, you'll always begin with this foundation row. So let us go straight into row 2. Now we are going to be working a variation on the Tunisian simple stitch, which means that we're going to be working into these vertical bars here. So we're not going to work into this first vertical bar because that corresponds to the loop that's already on our hook, and we're going to work a Tunisian simple stitch 2 together over the next 2 vertical bars. So all that means is that we'll insert our hook under the first vertical bar, also under the second, yarn over and pull up a loop. So we have effectively worked one stitch across these 2 loops. So now we need to make up for that missing stitch. So what we're going to do is work a Tunisian top loop stitch. So if we have a look here at the chain that we worked on that return pass, we will see that we have a top loop right here and a bottom loop down here. And it's this top loop that we want to work into. So we are going to insert our hook under that top loop, yarn over and pull up a loop, and that is our stitch made. So now basically, rather than working a Tunisian simple stitch into the first 2 vertical bars, we have worked a Tunisian simple stitch 2 together and our top loop stitch. So we still have the same number of loops that we would expect. And we're just going to continue to repeat that pattern all the way along. So we'll do our next Tunisian simple stitch 2 together into the next 2 vertical bars, and then we'll do our Tunisian top loop stitch into the top of that chain, and we'll just continue to repeat that all the way along. So now at the end of the row, we need to be careful not to miss this last chain because we do need to keep our stitch count correct. So we'll finish off with our top loop stitch in there, and then all we have left to do now is work our end stitch. So to do that, let's just rotate our work to the side a little, and we can see we have our front loop here and our back loop, and we need to go under both of those to work the end stitch. So under the front loop and also under the back loop, there we go. And we'll just yarn over and pull up a loop. So at this point, we should still have 12 loops on our hook corresponding to the 12 chains. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So that is perfect. And now we can just work our return pass as normal. So we'll chain 1 and then just work those loops off all the way back to the start. Alrighty, so that is row 2 done. So let's go straight onto row 3 now. So it's going to be very similar to row 2, except that we're going to offset the position of our Tunisian simple stitch 2 togethers by 1, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So again, not working into that first vertical bar, and now we're going to do a Tunisian simple stitch into the first stitch. So we're not doing the 2 together here yet. So there's 1 Tunisian simple stitch done. Now I'm going to do my Tunisian simple stitch 2 together. So just be careful that you get the correct 2 bars here, because sometimes this first one can be a little bit tricky to see. But we just go in through each of the next 2, and that's our 2 together done. And now we'll work our top loop stitch like so. So now we just need to keep repeating that pattern all the way along. So the Tunisian simple stitch 2 together and the Tunisian top loop stitch. And then at the end of the row, we will have 1 vertical bar remaining, and I'll show you how to handle that. Alrighty, so here we are, we're at the end of the row. So if you remember now, we've offset the position of our Tunisian simple stitch 2 together, which means we have an extra vertical bar left over here. And we're just going to do a simple Tunisian simple stitch with that. And then lastly, work our end stitch as normal, going under both loops. And that is row 3 done. So again, let's just work our return pass as normal, all the way back to the start. Okay, so that is row 3 done. So the good news is all you need to do now is continue repeating rows 2 and 3 for the entire length of the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead now and work a few more rows just so you can see what the stitch pattern is going to look like, and then we will finish off with a bind off row. Okay, so I have worked a few more rows of this stitch pattern and I absolutely love how it is turning out. I really love this diagonal stripe effect we get from offsetting those stitches. Now the only thing I will say about this stitch pattern is that it does tend to lean a little bit, so you might find that your edges are not exactly straight, but don't worry about this because you can always block your work later if you do need to straighten anything up, and especially with Tunisian crochet you might find that you have to block anyway because of curling or any other little irregularities. So let's go ahead and work our bind off row now. So we're going to do that just to close up all these little gaps along the top of our work. So we're going to work a slip stitch bind off. So to do that, we will insert our hook under that first loop, yarn over and pull up a loop, but then instead of leaving the loop on the hook, we'll just continue to draw it all the way through. And I'll just continue to repeat that all the way along. So basically, we're working a slip stitch through every vertical bar all the way along. And then again at the end of the row, not forgetting to work the last slip stitch through our end stitch here. And there we go, we are all done. Okay, so here is my almost finished infinity scarf. So you can see here that there are some little inconsistencies in the width at different points, and there's also plenty of curling at the edges, but luckily we can correct both of these issues with blocking. So I used a wet blocking method for my scarf because my yarn fibre was almost entirely wool based, but you can use any blocking method that you wish and that suits your particular yarn. And then once the blocking is done and your scarf is dry, the final finishing step is to seam the short edges together to create a loop. Now, this means that the curl on the edges actually doesn't matter that much because you're going to be joining them together at the end. For my scarf, I used a mattress stitch seam on the right side, and I love this seaming method because it creates an almost invisible seam that is good and strong. And I do have a video on different seaming methods as well if you would like to check that out. So there we have it, we are all done. Thank you so much for joining me to make this Tunisian crochet infinity scarf, and I do have lots more free patterns and tutorials on my channel and my website nedandmimi.com, so be sure to check those out. Happy crocheting and take care.